Everybody, welcome back to the Meet Dave podcast. I'm Dave Williamson. Shout out to everybody who I hung out with last week at the San Diego Egg Fest, put on by the West Coast Barbecue Shop and Big Green Egg. It was a blast. I hosted it. I got to just keep the crowd hyped with the microphone and let them know which demonstrations were happening when. I walked around with a live stream on Big Green Egg's Instagram, and then I got to jump up with my buddy, the Barbecue Buddha, who's been on the podcast before, and help him with his demonstration when he was showing everyone how to cook delicious picanha. I ate a ton of food, and I really had a blast meeting new friends and seeing old ones. So shout out if you were there, and shout out to Derek and the whole West Coast Barbecue team for having me there, man. It was a lot of fun. This week, I'm going to be in Bakersfield, guys, on Sunday at the Well Comedy Club. Salty's Barbecue, which is a local favorite spot of everyone who lives in Bakersfield, one of the best barbecue joints around. They're going to collaborate with the kitchen at the Well, and we're going to have some specialty items on the menu from Salty. So that's going to be a lot of fun. It's a really cool comedy club. I'm going to be doing a lot of new material. So even if you saw me last time, please come out and have fun with us. And then the following weekend, I am going to be in Chicago, June 29th to July 1st. I'm going to be at the Schaumburg Improv. It's one of the coolest clubs. If you know someone in the Chicago area and you don't live in the Chicago area, just send them out. Everyone knows somebody in the Chicago area. Schaumburg Improv, June 29th to July 1st. Get tickets at DaveWilliamson.com. A lot of excitement. I know this is a long intro, but the new labels are in. Everyone has been waiting. I'm going to be mailing these out. If you haven't gotten them yet, you should be getting them any minute now. But this is the new redesigned label, everybody, for the Meet Dave All-Purpose Seasoning and Rub. Very proud of it. Very excited to finally have it out for you guys. This podcast episode is a good one. You guys know I love butcher shops, and this dude just wrote a whole book about butcher shops. Got some great recipes as well. Very interesting dude. Was super happy to get him on the podcast. I think you're really going to enjoy him, everybody. Please meet Matt Moore. Well, this is exciting, man. I love talking butcher shops, so I want to talk about you, but I also want to talk about this book a lot because you just put out a book called Butcher on the Block: Everyday Recipes, Stories, and Inspirations from Your Local Butcher and Beyond. And I think that's such a smart way to go about putting together any sort of meat or barbecue book, because the butchers are truly some of the most fascinating people and some of the best people to learn from when it comes to, the barbecue world.
I should hire you to do my promotion, man. I'm glad that you see the meaning. For me, my last two books were focused on barbecue and grilling. So I wrote a book called The South's Best Butts. It was not a calendar. It was a cookbook. It was a grand tour of the barbecue belt. And then ultimately followed that with a book called Serial Griller, which focused on everything hot and fast and live fire grilling. And, for me, after building a credibility and an audience in barbecue and grilling space, when you have the question, what's next? What do you want to write? I really toiled with the idea for quite some time, but it was really fun for me to go back to the very beginning, to go to the local butcher shop. The idea that a meal is only as good as your ingredients, but also is kind of personal for me because my grandfather was also a butcher. So It allowed me to further extend, these beautiful worlds of barbecue and grilling, but not be limited by them. And then also pay homage to a trade that, had died out in my family and pick it back up as to where it is today.
It's booming right now, man. It's coming back with a vengeance. The mom and pop, butcher shops. I actually think when I started this podcast, I think episode 1 was my buddy Dustin Bartz, who's a pitmaster that I learned a lot from, right? And then I want to say it was episode 2. I hit up these guys in town who have now become very good friends of mine who have a butcher shop down in Hollywood called Standings Butchery. And okay. I would love to going in there when I'd be in Hollywood for something. I'd always pop in. And at the time, it was one of the few just little, small hole in the wall butcher, like just pure butcher shops that you could find. Now on my side of town, there's like 3 that I could throw a stone and hit. It's like popping off now. And now you got Wild Foods that's out there. It's like it's a commercial grocery store that sells frozen meats, and it's definitely becoming a thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I wanted to highlight it, and we travel from Chinatown and San Francisco to the Bronx, even to the south of France, where in a weird way, you're seeing a revitalization to the American butcher shop, right? Most of it was kind of destroyed in the 70s and 80s, where commercial supermarkets took over. They no longer were butchering in house. It was from a processing facility, and Americans are wanting to know more of that connection with food. And obviously, it's going to vary. Being in Los Angeles, you might have more access than you might have in Floyd, Virginia. But if you go to Europe, forever, for centuries, it's always been the local butcher, and they're now starting to get the supermarkets, or the supermarché, as they say in France. And so for me, kind of showcasing what's still there and saying, no, you should be preserving this. We're trying to bring this back. But we also go to a supermarket. We go to a Kroger grocery store, which is right down the street from my house. And there's a guy named Tommy Kelly there that's the butcher. Probably doesn't really cut meat in-house, but he still serves as a constituent to all the folks that are coming there and shopping and walking them through what they can use. So I think we really wanted to showcase a wide array of places and personnel, including vegetable butchering and seafood. Again, just to start the meal. The meal is only as good as your ingredients. Go source the best that you can.
Yeah, totally. And you're based in Nashville, and there's a butcher shop that I visited and got to know the dudes in there. It's right across the street from the comedy club Zanies that I work. It's called Smoking Oaks, I think it is.
Smoking Oaks, yep.
Very cool spot.
We also have Porter Road. We feature, which has become really well known, especially in the mail order side. Two chefs that kind of sought to have better ingredients and essentially started buying some farms in Kentucky and Pennsylvania and Tennessee and creating literally like from nose to tail butchering, but also starting that vertical integration from raising the animals, going through the harvesting and slaughter process to processing and packaging. And you can order their goods from all over the country.
So tell us about some of the specific butcher shops that you visited or highlighted in this book.
It's a wide array of places and people. I mentioned earlier that it's not just meat and game, but we do go down paths of seafood and vegetable butchering too. And quite honestly, we can pick it up at the vegetable butcher. Cara Mangini was one of the first folks that I sought out when I decided that I wanted to write this book, because I thought it was really interesting that at New York's Eataly, they had set aside a stand for the vegetable butcher. And it's a little tongue in cheek, right? You're thinking about a vegetable butcher, but if you really think about the utility, a lot of us go to the butcher shop to seek specific cuts to pull off a certain dish, like an ossobuco or the beef hammer that requires us to cook in that method. And, some people don't know how to break down a cabbage for a coleslaw or vegetables for a stir fry. Yeah. And so, we present this idea because I do want it to be a well-rounded, diverse selection of people and places. We go down to Enterprise, Alabama, meet a gentleman by the name of Omar who tried to come to this country several different times and eventually made his way here and has built his own version of the American dream and is now employing Americans. And he's playing off the old kind of carniceria techniques that he learned in Mexico. And he's brought that culture to Enterprise, Alabama, which also has this incredible story about the boll weevil and all the things that transpired. So we do cover from the Bronx to Alabama to, San Francisco and California, as I mentioned, going to France as well. One of the first trips that we took was headed to Cambridge City, Indiana. Really, really cool place. And one of the trends that I found is that oftentimes a lot of the spaces are generational. This is 4 generations. They came over from Germany. They brought the trade of butchering with them. They arrived in the United States. They continued the trade, and they settled into that area. And it's something that each generation has had to buy into, not necessarily inherit, but they've had to buy into the business to allow the family to retire. And they've taken it and build it in their own reins. So we went to 12 different spots. It's kind of been the format of the last few books. And again, I always say that we start as strangers and we end up as family. And it's really a joy for me to be able to share the platform and be able to have the responsibility to tell these folks stories and share their recipes.
Yeah, I think it would be cooler if the vegetable butcher had a giant squash and was literally cutting it up. Here's the ribs, here's the rump of the squash. A little backstrap action for you.
Here's the tenderloin.
Yeah. That's really cool, man. And I am also familiar with Enterprise, Alabama. I have randomly a friend who lives there from college because I went to school at Auburn University in Alabama.
I won't hold that against you, man. I'm a Georgia Bulldog.
Oh, well, you got all the bragging rights right now. So, yeah, be polite.
For a little while.
Yeah. Okay, so what should the layman? So the dad, it's Father's Day, you know. We just have Father's. So what should the dad who's just going to the butcher shop to get a good meal or to buy a steak for a special occasion, whatever? What should they know going into a butcher shop, and what kind of questions should they be armed with? How should they approach it?
I think the first thing is that they should know that it's a super approachable space. Remember, the butcher is also in business, so it's their job to give you a quality product, to give you good advice. I joke around and kind of in the beginning of the book that the job of the butcher is somebody that gives. You know, they have a great appreciation for the animal, or in the instance of seafood or vegetables, the same as well. That they want you to get the most of it, and oftentimes we're having to ask them, hey, can you cut it this way? Can you give me this much? Can you tie it this way? Can you order me this? And then probably my favorite question that butchers often get is, how do you cook this? You know, they're having to give away their tricks and their secrets all the time. So, you know, I think Father's Day is just, you know, coming up. We've got the holidays that are coming up for summer, and probably one of my favorite cuts that we explored is the spinalis muscle, which is really the ribeye cap. You know, my wife loves a beef tenderloin because of its tenderness, right? But I like a ribeye because of the flavor. And so we get to meet in the middle with the ribeye cap that offers that same tenderness and that kind of delicious beefy flavor. And so that's typically something that you can ask for, you know, butcher, if they don't do that already in house. I know that's going to be kind of the summer favorite for me on my grill, especially as I'm entertaining at home.
Spinalis is a great inside baseball term for anybody in the meat world. So everyone should familiarize themselves with which little part of the steak that is, because as you're cutting it, you can go, oh, here's the best piece. Here's a spinalis. Go for it, you know? And then it just makes you look kind of...
Yeah, you throw it out. It's a good test question, you know? It really impress your friends at the barbecue, right?
Yeah, because it sounds technical, you know? It's like spinalis. Yeah, I love going into butcher shops, you know, especially a few years ago when they were a little harder to find, the mom and pop spots or whatever, because I travel, you know, for comedy for a living, and my favorite thing would be to pop into butcher shops when I could find them, even if I was on the road and wasn't necessarily going to buy anything or cook anything. I treat them, and my listeners have heard me say this 1,000 times, I treat it like a record shop where I just go in and I browse and I ask the butcher questions, and I want to know why they set up their cases certain ways, and you know, just ask them about where they source their beef from, and you know, what their opinions are on grass fed and grain finish and all that kind of stuff. And have you based any strong, or have you formed any strong opinions on that kind of stuff since you've done such an immersion in this world?
You know, a quote that really struck me writing the book came from James Peisker, who founded Porter Road Butcher. And he said, I'm a butcher, and I tell people to eat less meat, but I tell them to eat better meat.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great quote. You know, at the end of the day, it is a focus on quality, and they work so hard to produce these products. You know, I think you can wax poetically on grass-fed, the benefits potentially, but at the same time, you could go have a corn-fed piece of beef that in the 60s and 70s they said was the best, right? Or Wagyu and all these different techniques. But I think at the end of the day, you know, what we're trying to focus on in this book is, again, go back to that idea that a meal is only as good as your ingredients. And a lot of times there's unknown cuts or there's unknown techniques that we try to bring to light in the book that can make the most of a particular cut. For example, just this past weekend, we had some friends over to my house for a little family meal, and in a last minute effort, I ran up to the little butcher shop. They didn't have a whole lot. They had some top sirloin. It was about half the price of, you know, maybe some of the other call cuts. And immediately I said, all right, I'm going to make my grandfather's kind of shish kebab recipe, because I can take that cut that's really, really humble, you know, super affordable. And by cutting it into kebabs, I'm starting to create kind of my own butchering technique to make some more tenderness and open up for the opportunity for a marinade. And then, of course, high heat on a grill and pulling it at medium rare. I think the best compliment I get is from one of the ladies that was over for dinner. She said, wow, this is maybe the best filet I've ever had in my life. And sometimes you want to, you know, say, of course, yeah, that's exactly what you're getting. But for me, I said, no, it's actually not that. It's actually, it's a top sirloin, but we've treated it in a method that we've set up that particular cut for the best chance of success. And that's super important when it comes to entertaining, especially if folks are on a budget as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so what's your background in this world, in this space? Like, where did this passion come from?
Butcher on the Block is actually my fifth cookbook. So I grew up in a family where, as I mentioned earlier, my grandfather was a butcher on my
Yeah.
mom's side, and my grandmother was just probably one of the best cooks you could ever find in South Georgia. We had all the classics like fried chicken and turnip greens and macaroni and cheese, but we also have Middle Eastern Lebanese heritage. So we had the meat pies and the grape leaves and the tabbouleh and the hummus and all those types of dishes, which if you've never had fried chicken with a little tabbouleh and some labna, is probably one of the greatest combinations that's ever existed in food. My dad's side of the family comes from Mississippi, and we're in the cattle business, so there's a lot of roots that kind of brought me to this space. But when I moved to Nashville after attending University of Georgia, I was playing music. I was kind of in the jam band phase, and sort of got tired of being on a road with seven other guys and traveling all over. And one of the things we would always do is stop and pick up really good food. And I decided one day, I told my agent, I said, I think I'm going to write a cookbook. He said, I think that's maybe a better idea than any of the songs you've written. And I staged it after just a basic. I said the book was called Have a River for Dinner. It was teaching guys how to cook. And it was turned down by every agent and every publisher in New York. I went on to self-publish the book, and it became a New York Times best cookbook.
Hey.
And that kind of set me down the road of writing more books. I wrote a book called A Southern Gentleman's Kitchen, which is kind of my homage to the South. And then I really loved kind of changing it. Instead of writing about me, my last three books, Butcher on the Block, obviously, Serial Griller, and The South's Best Butts, we've gone out on the road and we've sought to track down some really interesting people and tell their stories, share their secrets, their philosophies. And I'm just kind of the grand conductor of the circus. I'm trying to shine a spotlight on a lot of really great people that I think deserve that attention.
Well, maybe the next move now is just writing songs about food. That's it. You just become the meat song, the meat ballad guy.
Hey, listen, there's probably a niche for it. It probably would do better than my other music.
I would listen. So with all you've experienced and learned through writing this cookbook, walk me through your perfect butcher. What if I gave you $1 gazillion and said, build your perfect butcher shop? What would it look like?
Perfect butcher shop. That's a good question. Nobody's even asked me that in the last 3 years. So for me, first and foremost, I would have. You're good at it. I think kind of the gateway drug to the butcher shop is the specialty kind of sausages or grinds that you find in house. I tell people all the time, like, if you're afraid to go to the local butcher, you've never been to a local butcher, go down there and buy whatever meat they have ground that day. Because oftentimes you may pay a couple bucks more per pound, but you may be getting the tails and trimmings of some really good dry aged cuts, the freshness of that. And you make a loose patty and put it in a cast iron skillet and make a burger. It's going to change your life. So I would explore a wider range of that. I think sausages are also really a key testament of what you find in the local butcher. I like the idea of whole animal and large cuts. I think if there was a path I would noodle down, it would be selling larger cuts so that people can take on more responsibilities of dry aging at home. And then, I would have sort of my own little, maybe Matt's Playhouse of just things that I'm working on. I like the idea of always kind of having a grilling and barbecue section that would be the off cuts. In the book, we called it the alternative cuts, if you will, kind of having some fun with a music background. But just, items that I find throughout my travels that you could bring to a local market and wax poetically on. So it'd be pretty diverse. I probably wouldn't have fillets and ribeyes and strip steaks in there. I think I would challenge the status quo and get people eating more flank and Denver and those types of cuts as well.
Oh, such underrated cuts of meat, man.
Yeah, indeed.
Flank. I mean, Denver cuts are like kind of a popular thing now. That's like a new trend. But just a thinner cut steak like that with a flank or a skirt steak or whatever, it's so good because there's so much surface area and it's so hard to mess up because you're just going to sear it anyways. It's not like you're going to, you don't need to cook it for very long. I love that. I love that philosophy.
There's a really cool recipe in the book, which is a scored flank steak with a kind of a Dijon caper board sauce. So for your folks that love an Adam Perry Lang, it's kind of my homage to him, who basically created the board sauce.
Yeah.
Flank steak is a perfect cut. However, I don't care how many times I've cooked flank, it's sometimes a hard cut to get a really hard sear because of the natural striations of the muscle and the meat. It just sometimes doesn't get that sear that you're looking for. So we solve that by actually kind of putting a crosshatch very, very thinly and tightly across the meat. Because it kind of loosens it up, sort of, if you will. This is my loosen it up if I'm giving a comedy show to you.
Yeah.
And by doing that, it allows it to accept the heat from the grill. So like just that little kind of butchering method on the flank steak and putting a crosshatch on it. Sometimes you see it on hot dogs and other types of things. Really allowed me to get a hard sear, and then we lay it on top of this mix of mustard and shallot and capers, and just slice it into the meat. It's absolutely delicious. It's one of my favorite recipes in the book.
Oh, I'm gonna have to try that out. I've never thought to do that before, to cut it before I put it in the grill like that.
Sure.
So I love the shout out to Adam Perry Lang there. He's been doing pop-ups during the pandemic. APL closed down the restaurant he had up near Hollywood, and he's been doing barbecue pop-ups now all over the city. And so he finally had one over on my side of town, and it was in a Manhattan Beach sports bar called Grunions. Mm-hmm. So I popped by to check it out and support him. And dude, guy was killing it, man. A little 3-hour line down the street. I mean, was selling tire racks of ribs and beef ribs, and had a pork belly sandwich. And I mean, it was incredible, man. Yeah, he's crushing it right now.
I love what people don't see on that is just how much hard work that takes to replicate every single day. Pretty easy to pan fry a sea scallop, but to pull off the beef ribs and the racks of pork that he's doing, and just all the other things that he's just having fun. Actually, I mean, that's, if you look at it, he's having fun, and I think it's paying off more than any of the recognition that he's gotten in a really long career.
Oh, barbecue especially. I mean, I go places all the time, and then people will be like, Dave, your ribs are better than these ribs. And I'm like, yeah, but they just sold 4,000 of them. I was making one rack. I put all my love and attention into one rack with no distractions. These people are cooking, and then especially when it's a pop-up, it's like now you're cooking like in a parking lot, not in your house where you have all your tools, or in a restaurant where you have everything set up, and you are replicating the quality over and over and over again with all these outside. I mean, I'm like, it's not a contest. Like, I would hope that my one rack of ribs can at least be spoken about in the same conversation as someone who's cooking thousands of them, So I recently learned, so I'm always learning, I've only kind of been super immersed in this world for 5 or 6 years, and I learn new shit all the time. It's why I do this podcast, really. It's a selfish way for me to learn and ask and meet people like you and ask questions. So 2 things that I've been turned on to recently. One, in the pork world, is Iberico pork. Which is from Spain. It's a specific breed of pig, and they call it the Wagyu of pork. So I'm wondering if you've had any experience with that. And then the beef I've recently been turned on to is called, I don't know if I'm Piedmontese, I think is how you say it. Mm-hmm. And so I just got some of that sent to me, and I'm super excited to try that out for the first time. You have any experience with either of those?
I do. If you talk about Iberico, traditionally we're talking a quote unquote, like the idea was the free range hog, if you will, right? Kind of going back to the beginning, especially important for the kind of their version of a prosciutto that you'll find specific in Spain. And I think, don't hold me to it, but instead of being fed what you find in more commercialized pork productions, it's primarily like an acorn and nut style diet that's derived, so a little more wild. And you're right. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that a lot of people have, especially when it comes to pork, is we overcook it. The USDA used to have a guideline that it had to be cooked to 165 degrees. They've now reduced it to, I think, 145, 150. But truth be told, like the old worries of the not spinalis, goodness gracious, I'm going to drop the name of it right now. The trichina worm, if you will. Where, you put me to the scientific method today. Trichinosis, pretty close in names.
Well, we could edit it and make it seem like you pulled that seamlessly.
Trichinosis. There we go. One more time. That's kind of gone. So I think a lot of times people are overcooking pork, and they don't have a great love language to pork because it's always been dry and just not a great cut. So I do think that the Iberico varieties offer, really, really good fats and kind of a gateway to better pork. The Piedmontese beef, again, often a different style. I think you'll find a lot of it comes in marketing, but a lot of it comes from the specific regions that you find. My father grew up in the cattle business. One of the first things I learned how to do was tie a fish hook, and then also how to show a cow. And that was around the time that Angus beef became, such a big deal. And he was in the cattle business for 30 years. He had never heard of Wagyu until it started to be promoted. Now we obviously have American Wagyu and Australian, and of course Japanese as well. So I think, those variety of flavors and techniques and how they're raised, it just goes back to the beginning. If you find a great quality shop, it's a great place for you to go out and source and procure that raw ingredient that you might seek to kind of elevate your cooking experience.
Yeah, and what they're telling me, so I already cooked my Iberico pork, and I had some pork belly, and I literally treated it like it was Wagyu. I just seared it, chopped it up, just super simple. It was incredible. It had so much flavor. It was great. And then this Piedmontese, what they're telling me about with that beef is that he's saying it's very lean. It's not super fatty, but it's still very, very tender.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're going to find it more along the lines of like a grass-fed beef here. And look, there's pros and cons of all, right? I mean, if you think of Wagyu, really what the implementation is you want as much fat and marbling as possible, whereas grass-fed is going to be, more holistically lean. And so you've got to certainly focus on the cooking and the technique. I find oftentimes that the grass-fed style beefs, lend themselves more to like a wild game. Of course, in the South, we do a lot of hunting and fishing down here. So one of my favorite things to serve people is like a good cut of venison or a venison steak. And they say, I don't like wild game. And then I serve them that. And they're like, why would I not ever eat this every single day of my life? And it's just having access to it. So I think in grass-fed beef specifically, you get a lot of those similar qualities that you get from wild game.
Yeah, I'm going to circle back and answer my own question. You were talking about, how you would set up your butcher shop or whatever. I'm going to tell you some stuff I would do in mine. All right.
Do it.
So everyone always asks me, like, Dave, when are you going to open a barbecue restaurant? When are you going to open a barbecue restaurant? I'm like, it would have to be a very specific situation for me to do that because I know what it takes to make a restaurant great, and I don't have that time and energy right now, and I don't want to do something haphazardly or half-ass. You know what I mean? So sure. I'm like, but a butcher shop I can get on board with because I think a butcher shop, you have the right staff. It's a little easier to put your love into day in, day out and still be a full-time stand-up comic. But I would, first of all, I like your idea of sausages. I think sausage is very important because if I go in, I like to buy a main thing. So I'm going to buy like either a really nice steak or I'm going to buy a barbecue cut like beef ribs or something, short ribs. So I go into a butcher shop, I want to buy the main thing, whatever I'm going to spend my most money on. But then I want some little upsell items, right? Something that's not too expensive, but is still a treat. It's always sausages for me. You got a little mix, a grab bag. Give me 2 of these, 2 of those, 2 of these. The aforementioned Standings Butchery, I thought was something they were doing is they figured out how to use different vegetables to put into their sausages just for the coloring. So sure. Just to make it kind of interesting, they would put like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example, but they'd put maybe like eggplant. Was that something they used? I don't know. But they'd have like a purple sausage and then they'd have like a green sausage. They have a red sausage, just using the dyes from the vegetables, I thought that was really cool. So now you have a little bit of pizzazz when you're coming in with your platter off the smoker, right? I like the idea of it being very sterile, I don't want too much noise in there. I like going in, I like to feel very clean. I like to be able to focus on the meat. You let the meat be the color that pops. All right. You gotta have lots of upsell items. You gotta have the, I want when I go, when I go in and I'm going to buy a nice steak for my wife and I to cook for my wife and I for dinner that night, I'm going to grab a bottle of wine. I'm going to grab some cheeses, right? For the charcuterie little entree, I'm going to get some rubs because make sure that I might have some at home. So, what's going to make this one special, and then, all right, here's where we get a little creative. Are you ready? And I'm
ready.
I'm even hesitant to put this out there because but if someone steals this and runs with it, hey, there's room for all of us. So here's two things I would want to do in the Meat Dave Butcher Shop. One, I'm gonna have like Rectech makes these Trailblazer smokers. They're little small travel smokers. When we go on the tour bus, I bring them with me. I'd have something along those lines, right? I'd have 3 of them that you could sign out. Not everyone has a smoker at their house, Everyone's got grills, but if it's a special occasion, it's a weekend, you want to try your first brisket, and I'm selling you the brisket, you could also just sign out one of the smokers and just leave a deposit and you bring it back. You know what I'm saying?
I like that. You can put an air tag on it too, right? Track it down.
Good idea. Good idea. And you also make them sign a lot of waivers in case they blow up their yard. And now you mentioned dry aging before too. You can have dry age stuff all ready to go in the case, you know, whatever. But I'm going to have a dry age case there where someone could buy a steak, sign the tag, and the tag says, you know, for Dave or for Matt. Matt Moore, you know, Matt Moore's, blah, 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 you know, and then the date that it gets put in there. And then you put it in and then people can come visit their dry, you know, they come in after a week. They go, oh, look at it. That's mine. You're showing, it's like dads at the emergency, or not the emergency room. It's like dads at the delivery room when they're like looking at their kids through the window, and it's like, oh, which baby's yours? Oh, that's my newborn right there. Yeah, that's mine. So the dads would just gather every Friday afternoon after work and just be like, oh, look, mine's 2 weeks along. Oh, that's mine over there. I can't wait to have that tomahawk. And I think that would be really cool to be able to visit your food as it's dry aging. What do you think? Any investors? Any investors out there?
Are you ready for me to break some bad news to you?
Oh shit. Okay, yeah. Let me know. Poke some holes in it.
Your concept already exists.
Well, that's good news.
And the only negative is you're gonna have to travel to one of the worst places ever, the south of France, to go check it out. Just kidding. One of the most beautiful places in the world, because exactly what you described is a place that we visited called Maison Maillard, which is, you know, named after the Maillard reaction and grilling. And it's exactly that. Some of the best wine, the foie gras, the charcuterie, the cheeses. They have smokers there. Now, they don't rent them, but you can buy them. You can take them, which is a big piece. They have a dry aging case where they'll write it down. And then one thing that we all both forgot, you and I forgot about this, the big secret of the butcher shops, that's kind of a trend that started in Europe that you're starting to see, of course, here in the United States too. Probably the best meal you get in France is actually from the butcher shop to go. You know, the French don't eat a lot of like fast foods, and I don't think they do like Uber Eats and all the things that we lazy Americans do here. They actually go to the butcher shop, buy maybe the cut that they're looking to make for the weekend, and then they buy like what's called the plat du jour, whatever they're cooking that day. So it could be like a stewed pork that they serve with olives and couscous, or a lasagna, or a terrine, or a pate, or something along those lines. And so they do have this whole other section that while you're there, you can actually pick up dinner and come home a hero and serve the family as well. So I think they're pretty close to your idea. I don't know if they're putting names on the dry age cuts. I really like that idea, like a Proud Papa.
Yeah.
But that's one of the places you'll have to go track down, and maybe you can get a gig out there. I think it'd be a good timing for you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If anyone's booking comedy in France, let me know. Yeah. And I think that's important. I think I would definitely have like I don't know if I would be doing like dinner stuff, but I would do like a sandwich counter. So yeah, you could go in there and get lunch. You'd go in there, get lunch. You'd get a brisket sandwich. So we smoked the brisket in the back that day, and then you get the bread. And then while you're there, all right, I got my lunch. Now I'm going to pick up a steak to cook for my wife tonight as well while I'm there, right? There's a place in Indianapolis that had a really good sandwich, a very simple, very good sandwich counter. It had a really funny name. It was a place called like Goose the Market, or it was something along those lines. But okay. really neat place that did it that way. So anyways, any investors out there, you know how to get a hold of me. Let's get the Meet Dave Butcher Shop cranking here in El Segundo, California.
I like it. I like it.
Walk me through maybe one or two more of the recipes from the book that you'd like to share, because I feel like I learned something with the only one you've shared so far.
You know, probably this fifth book, and I often kind of look back when they're done and think about sort of the bite that sort of stopped me in my tracks. I remember a couple when I was doing Serial Griller. We spent some time with Michael Solomonoff up at Zahav in Philadelphia, James Beard, best chef in America. And he did kind of a dry-aged veal dish that was just unbelievable. But it wasn't just fine dining. I remember there was a flanken rib that we got from a guy named Cadillac that cooks outside of a strip club in Atlanta.
Sounds right.
He did kind of a flanken rib with a grilled jalapeno that he just rolled in kosher salt. And it was like, eat the jalapeno with the salt and then chase it with this fatty rib. That was one of those dishes that I continue to chase. For Butcher, it was super simple. It was actually the first trip that we made. We were up in Cambridge City, Indiana with the Rim family, and they were putting out this spread of sweet breads, and they were like actually barbecuing whole hogs heads. So we were pulling all the meat and making tacos out of the actual
jowls and stuff. Yeah.
And yeah, just great. It's just like a pork shoulder. And I was talking to them, and they were talking about, some of the days that they spend working at the plant and processing. And kind of the family patriarch Jerry said, some days I'm so busy, we just cut the tail trimmings, little pearls of meat that come out of the tails of the ribeyes and the strips, and we just dunk them in a can of Worcestershire, and we just kind of eat off that all day long. And I was like, well, where's that dish? And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, I want that dish. And so he drove up to the plant, found a couple of the trimmings, trimmed it by hand, and came back with, like, those plastic containers, look like you get them from like the Thai and the Asian places. It's like a clear container. It's just a sauce, just Worcestershire sauce with all this meat floating around in it. We just took toothpicks and started eating it, and it was just two ingredients: just a piece of meat, raw, soaked in Worcestershire, cold beer. Man, just unbelievable. And so I was like, that's got to make the cookbook. Why not? It's two ingredients, and we don't even cook. So you find a lot of disparate techniques and recipes across the board. I will tell you, probably the best carrot cake I've ever had in my entire life, I think, was completely vegan, completely gluten-free, and it came from Cara in San Francisco. And my mom's got a hell of a carrot cake, but that was really, really close. So it took down some of my previous expectations about all the labels that we sometimes put on food, because at the end of the day, good food is good food. I just want to eat it.
Yeah. People underestimate the importance of good desserts in the barbecue world. I was just at the San Diego Big Green Egg Festival this past weekend, and of all the amazing food I had, the fact that I ended my day with some banana Foster and some really good peach cobbler and some things like that, was like, man, this is like just literally the bow on this perfect day of eating. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. Desserts. Probably one of the favorite ones. There's a lot of byproducts in the butchering business, tallow being specifically like the beef fat. And we came across a recipe in Alaska.
Hello. Yes. Beef tallow.
Beef tallow. But what they do in Alaska is Alaskan ice cream, where they take the hot melted tallow and they would pour it into the snow with fresh fruit and sugar, and just basically back and forth until it emulsified, until where the fat kind of froze in the ice with the sugar and the cream. And they made what's called akutat, which is an Alaskan ice cream. So we feature that. It's kind of like a paleo. People lose their mind because it's basically a dairy-free ice cream.
I'm just gonna have to let that sit for a second. that could you say that whole sentence again, but maybe slower and sexier? Alaskan tallow ice cream, Luis. Podcast is over. We've peaked.
Done. See ya.
All right. That sounds amazing too. That's incredible. All right. Well, before I forget and wrap it up or whatever, I got to ask you this, because this has been something that I'm definitely pretty ignorant with, and I've really starting to have fun getting new knives and getting into knives and some of the tools at my house, that I use, and it's an investment, man. When you buy a nice set of knives, or for either prepping the meat or slicing when you're done or whatever. If somebody's Father's Day just passed. If you're buying like something for your dads, I get that all the time. People are like, what brisket slicing knife should I have? So what tools do you think, with this time that you spent with butchers and just having butchery in your lineage and everything, what's the tools that people should invest with from a knives perspective to have the best set to be successful in realm?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think everybody, and if you go to any like Father's Day or Dad's gift guide, it's always going to be like a chef's knife, right? Which is important for like chopping and prepping. The tool that's most common in the butchering world was what we call like a boning knife, right? And so I think the vast majority of home cooks do not have a boning knife, and so you have one that's stiff and you have one that's like a semi-flex. And so I think that's a great gift for folks. One of the reasons I wrote the book, Dave, is during COVID. We all remember. You go to the grocery store and you would don up. I have 2 young kids at home, and I was going out. You feel like you're on the Serengeti, stalking food to feed your family because it was so scarce. And then I would end up at the grocery store and I would notice things like all the boneless, skinless chicken breasts were gone, all the ribeyes, all the tenderloins, all those things were gone. But what was sitting there was like whole chickens, beef ribs, briskets, and I'm like, well, I love this stuff. Like, people just didn't know how to break down a whole chicken. And so sometimes it's just a matter of having the good tools. So I would say a stiff and a semi-flex boning knife is something you could buy for basically anybody, and I bet not a lot of them have that in their kitchen repertoire. And there's a lot of really great brands that make it. Of course, the old cliche is that, a butcher's always going to tell you one of the most important tools is a sharp knife. And so there's a lot of ways to do that today, from being able to buy sharpeners themselves to sending it off to have it sharpened. But I would say a boning knife, if it's not in your kitchen repertoire, then it definitely should be.
Yeah, I don't have one. I have a brisket slicing, a big slicing knife, very specific for, slicing briskets and whatever. And then I have like 6 just like all-purpose kitchen knives, basically, because those are the ones that look the coolest, and I just keep getting those.
You know what's so funny, man, is I have tons of really, really great expensive knives, right? And I love them. They're all sharp as hell. It's probably the most expensive thing. If somebody came in and tried to rob my house, if they went over to my knife rack and just grabbed it and left, it would probably cost me more. But like I'm becoming my grandmother in a lot of ways. Like I find myself using like a little cheap ceramic paring knife and like cutting everything in my hand now, like almost a dull blade. It's funny how like it comes full circle. I've got all these like expensive Japanese and American and German knives. I'll tell you, probably one of the coolest things that I put in the introduction of the book, my grandfather is someone that we honor in the book posthumously. And when he passed away, my aunt, his daughter, of course, gave me a branded knife that he had back in World War II. The brand is F Dick. So F period DICK. Yeah. And that was the company name. I think they still exist today. And it's a wooden handled boning knife, a semi-flex boning knife. And man, when I felt the edge of that thing, it probably hadn't been touched in 20 years. It's sharper than any knife I've ever felt. So I think that's it's something that still sits on my magnetic steel, and I use it. Like I think it's something that is a tangible that should still be used because it allows the memory, and we're kind of carrying on. So cool, man. That's really neat. Well, Matt, man, this has been awesome. Tell people how they can find your book, how they can buy your book, how they can keep in touch with you. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's been fun. You have to let me know the next time you're doing a gig here in Nashville, Tennessee, for a good laugh. Matt R. Moore is my Instagram, so MATTRMOORE. That's typically where I spend most of my time, although I'm not a huge social media guy, but I'll capture some moments here and there for you. And then you can pick up all my books, actually, wherever books are sold. But if you've got a local butcher shop, just like you have a good local bookstore, then I always say to start there first. Are you selling the books in butcher shops? We are. Yeah, we've got it at all the places typically that we featured in this book, and then we've got a great retail team that's selling it. And then in another weird world, I have a business actually based in the south of France, which is a fragrance business. So we sell a lot of my books and fragrances. Like Stag in Venice Beach is a great example where you can go pick up a bottle of moonshine cologne and pick up a copy of Butcher on the Block. Wait, your fragrance business is moonshine cologne? Yeah. How do we not talk about this? I didn't do enough research. Do you have all different flavors of? Do you have like charcoal cologne and smoker cologne and old fashioned whiskey cologne? Moonshine, a bluegrass, a sportsman. We have a women's called Speakeasy. If you go down the rabbit hole of fragrance, weirdly enough, the way that you compose a fragrance with top, middle, and base notes, same thing as a dish. You want savory, salt, acidity, umami. So yeah, there's a lot of similarities in the two, but there's nothing more fun than going into a really cool store and being able to see some of the fragrances that we've done along with the books as well. So that's a fun little tidbit. Maybe we'll do another podcast on fragrance. I'm in. I'm gonna check your book out. I'm gonna check your fragrances out, and then I can't wait for the new album of Meat Songs. Meat songs. Meat songs for love songs for losers, right? I love it. That's it, man. I appreciate you, Matt, man. Best of luck with it, dude. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.